Do you have fully vacant units on your property that you have mothballed until next semester? If you do, I bet you've thought to yourself, we should list those on Airbnb for game day weekends or for parents visiting their kids. Maybe you're in a college town like Austin or Raleigh or Tallahassee, and your city has large festivals and not enough hotel rooms. You know you could lease those units on a nightly or a weekly basis. Providing short-term rentals on platforms like Airbnb can provide a great source of ancillary income. But it takes it takes a lot of organization. There's the additional setup of providing linens and coffee makers and all the little things that a short-term tenant will expect. Then there's the regulatory and tax issues that could require additional work. More importantly, there's the time and labor to market on all the multiple platforms, handle the reservations and cancellations, the cleaning, and then there's the bookkeeping. All of this turns into a big distraction from the main job at hand, which is operating and leasing your property. That's where Vector Travel comes in. These guys know the short-term rental industry and they know how to relieve all of those burdens from the property manager. And best of all, they've become experts in how to do that with student properties. They understand the complexity of mixing travelers with college students. They know it so well, they can quickly identify if a student property is not going to be a good fit for their program. So if you have vacant units, reach out to Vector Travel and have them do a free, no obligation assessment to determine if enrolling your vacant units in their program will be beneficial. Go to vectorstays.com/SHI. Fill out a quick form to receive more information. You will also get the first month's service fee waived by going to that specific landing page. Again, that's vectorstays.com/SHI. Welcome to the Student Housing Insight Podcast, where we are putting you in touch with the people who bring student housing to life. I'm your host, Wesley Dees, and joining me today are two special guest co-hosts that are also our SHI ambassadors, Ryan Hand, who is also the Vice President of Business Development and Client Services at CA Ventures, and Greg King, General Manager at Asset Living at the Madison in Ames, Iowa. Guys, thanks for being my co-host today.
Glad to be here.
Yep, definitely glad.
Well, thanks for also serving as SHI ambassadors. We mixed some things up this year with that, and appreciate you guys stepping on board and promoting everything that we're doing in the industry, and appreciate you guys coming on and giving your perspective today. You know, before we get into kind of the main course of this episode, which is an interview that I did recently on how site staff and operators can prepare for a property sale, tell me a little bit, or tell the audience a little bit about your entree into student housing and what you like best about your career journey so far. Ron, we'll start with you.
Yeah, absolutely. No, thanks for having me. Yeah, I started on site like so many people I know in the industry. I was a community assistant at a property at the University of Central Florida, working for American Campus. And it's kind of funny because I didn't even really know who American Campus was. And again, this was back before they acquired GMH. But looking back on it, I think one of my favorite memories is at the time, Greg Dow was the COO. And I remember answering the phone at the property. And he said, "Hey, this is Greg Dow." And I said, "Oh, I'm sorry. I'm just a CA. Let me get the number." And he was like, "Just a CA? Just a CA?" He's like, "You guys are the people making it happen on the ground." And it's just kind of funny because it stuck with me. And I absolutely try to preach that to everybody, you know, that I talk to when I go on site, and just say, you guys are really the one giving the tours and making everything happen and creating the relationships with these students. So, you know, I think, which would lead me to my next point, you know, my favorite part of my career progression through student housing has 100% been all the people I've met. You know, looking at the different operators in the sector and the different people in the sector, from the buyer side all the way, you know, from a smaller regional buyer developer to the institutional capital. I've had the pleasure with working with so many of them. And even when I stepped outside of the operations side and worked on the vendor side, I got to work hand in hand with almost every single operator. And I think we just have such a special industry. It's small and close knit, and I think we all try to help each other out. So that's really been my favorite thing. It's I've tried to leave a couple times and I've been pulled right back in, and I'm really glad that I'm still in student housing.
Now, CA Ventures has got a global footprint now. Are you helping out with any of the business development in the other countries or just in the U.S.?
Yes, sir. Yeah, absolutely. So I would say not as much as I'd like to be. It's hard enough even to get in Chicago from Texas. They believe that we are all the people with COVID sometimes. But, prior to COVID happening, there were definitely a lot of plans to go over there, help them set up. I've got a little bit of experience working in London and throughout the UK with a lot of the student operators there. So it's definitely something I help out with. I cannot wait till the borders open up. We're all, vaccinated and healthy, and we can go ahead and really start ramping things up, because the team there is really moving and shaking and doing a great job themselves. But absolutely, I will definitely be a helper to them in any way I can.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Greg.
So I go back to as a leasing and marketing manager. From there, I got my foot in the door with student housing. Started traveling, doing a lot more of the operational side. So kind of going either to distressed properties or just where they have a vacancy. So I got to work in a lot of different markets, a lot of different people, a lot of different universities. That kind of goes with what I guess I like most about it is we're all in the same boat, but very different in the same, whether it's the product and or market that I enjoy working with. So I know mine's a lot shorter and not as in depth as Ryan's here, but same boat though.
It's just a matter of time, Greg.
Yep.
Just a matter of time. So now you're originally from Ames or just Iowa?
Yep, just from Iowa. Super small town. I would say around 1,200. Good time around Christmas when everyone's back in town, but very small. And then went to Iowa State University, and that's where I kind of started with a property here in Ames, and then traveled. And now I'm back here in Ames. So
awesome. Well, guys, the reason I wanted specifically you guys to help me out in co-hosting this today is that, each of you have some pretty unique perspectives in the industry. Greg, you're on site making the gears turn. Ron, you're out trying to find more opportunity for CA Ventures to grow their management platform and create partnerships. So a sale of a property can directly impact you guys very differently. As operators, at the end of the day, we are going to be judged on how well we're able to help a property owner exit out of their investment. And so the interview today, which is from a February session of our memo webinar series. So for folks that are hearing that word for the first time, memo webinar series, that is a weekly meetup that we're doing each Wednesday at noon Eastern. We are not doing it the last week in March because that's the fifth week or the fifth Wednesday, I should say, in March. And there's only 4 letters in memo, so that gives you a little bit of understanding of how we came up with that acronym. But come back and if you're listening to this before the calendar turns over to April, we've got our first one for April coming up on April 7th. Super excited about that. If you're at the site level or new into student housing and have not, you're trying to figure this thing out about, where can this career take me? I can't express enough, how important it is for you to join on April 7th, because we've got 4 executives who went from being at the site level, started as student workers, and now are in executive and C-suite positions within their company. So I haven't tagged this site level to C-suite because we did one a couple years ago that we tagged with that title, but it's going to be very similar, and I think you'll have some great information coming out of that. So if you want more information on that, go to studenthousinginsight.com/memo. But getting back to my interview with that we're going over today is with Jamie Swick. She's a broker at Colliers International who specializes in student housing transactions. And what's unique and awesome about Jamie, I've known Jamie for years. She actually started out at the site level as a leasing agent. She moved from there to working in a corporate office in Gainesville, Florida, with a group that's really focused on the Florida markets, which is also called Colliers, but it's a different Collier than Colliers International. But she ended up becoming their VP of acquisitions, and then moved into a consulting role, and has now gone into brokerage with Colliers International. And so her and I have just had some great conversations since she's going into that position about, what it is that she was able to pick up from the consulting side as well as being on site that is working and has translated very well for her on the brokerage side. And so I was interested in talking to her and sharing her views with our audience, and really sharing what operators need to be doing in order to set the properties up for the best exit. Not only making sure that everything's in line for favorable underwriting, but also to make sure that we've got an on-time closing, because that's very important when it comes to student housing transactions, especially given the velocity that we have in leasing through our leasing season. If you don't hit things just right, it could end up delaying things. And someone very wise once told me, timing kills all deals. So let's go ahead and we'll play her interview now, and then let's come back and I'll get you guys to give your perspective on it. Jamie, welcome to Memo.
Hi, Wes. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
Well, hey, you have assessed a ton of student housing deals over your career, and I'm just completely thrilled that you were able to take the time out and talk to our audience today about kind of your experiences and some things that you've taken away. So let's just jump into it. There were a lot of properties 12 months ago when this pandemic started that really just, they were in that kind of period of looking at the pre-leasing and making decisions owners were making decisions if they wanted to tee things up for a sell. And obviously with March coming in, it just froze everything. And there were deals that I was working on that were literally on the closing table on March 13th when the national emergency was declared, that the bank came in and said, we're not going to do this today. So I've got a feeling that there's a lot of, I don't know if pin-up demand is really the right word, but there's a lot of those deals that were being looked at being traded last year that were not. Now they're looking at doing that. We're also refinancing is a big thing, and we'll talk about that in a later session. But I really wanted to focus on with you about, because I think that this year and next year, we're going to see a lot of people trying to sell their properties, and just really wanted to spend some time with you and, see kind of what you're seeing. And, before we jump into, to a lot of your perspectives on things, is it going to be a big year? What are your feelings on it? Do you think we'll see a lot of things transacting?
People that have to sell are going to sell. And so that's going to happen as a result of some properties that may or may not have become just functionally obsolete in this environment due to additional supply. So we are starting to reach a point in the industry nationwide where we're starting to see some of our earlier vintage stuff that's a little farther from campus going through the process of needing to be repositioned to market rate or conventional properties. So we're seeing some trends associated with that. But we also have folks that, they had underwritten their properties for a certain hold period. And typically that hold period is 3 to 5 years. And so now that they're coming to the end of the hold period for their fund, they have to make a decision. And then the third group is going to be the folks that are just going to essentially want to throw some spaghetti against the wall, test the market, see where things are, And those are going to come on the market as well, but I wouldn't necessarily say that those are going to be having a high likelihood of trading, just because we are still seeing a pretty reasonable disparity between buyer and seller expectations.
Gotcha. So, lay it out for us. What are the top, 3 to 5 mistakes that you see management companies as well as site staff make that end up kind of hindering a potential sell?
It's momentum. When you find out that a property is going on the market, what you have got to do is make sure that your mindset is the mindset of a victor. And it's a great thing to think about, because you can either be a victim and you can think of this as being a change for the negative, or you can look at it as quite literally a golden ticket, for the Willy Wonka chocolate factory, which is what it is. It is truly an opportunity. It's an opportunity to make the people that are selling the property cry because they're losing you. And it's an opportunity to make the people that are gaining that property and looking, ahead with that opportunity, and to do that in conjunction with you. And if you set yourself up well, and we'll go into how to do that obviously today, you're really going to have a great opportunity to make sure that your trajectory for your career is going at the best speed and at the best altitude that it possibly can.
So momentum, I'm writing that one down.
Mm-hmm. And then the other, I would say, is going to be attention to details. You cannot go into a situation where you know that there are going to be things that are going to come up as a result of either due diligence or as part of the marketing process that you don't have answers to. So making sure that you know and have the answers that people are going to need is going to really be key there. And I would like to sort of put as an asterisk to number 1, which is momentum. That is going to pertain to 2 key elements: collecting your rents and making sure that you're continuing to sign leases. And the third thing is really going to be making sure that your whole team is on board for the potential that this is. So it's not just your own mindset as an individual. It's going to be the need to really guide your whole team from your CAs to your maintenance techs to your porters. You've got to make sure that everybody is approaching that opportunity, with the best level of enthusiasm that they can. There's no reason for people to go home, grumbly every single day after work because a property is on the market. There's just no need for that. There's so much better opportunities that can be presented as a result of a sale, that teaching your team and guiding them on how to take advantage of it is really what I'm hoping you guys will take away today.
So a quick question on momentum, especially when it comes to leasing velocity. I've been, and I want to just kind of get your feedback and find out how a potential buyer looks at it. But I've been in situations where a property is got really good, year over year leasing numbers. They're outpacing the rest of the market, and maybe they haven't done that every year. And for whatever reason, they get halfway through the leasing season and it's like everything else catches up in the market. And a lot of that's typically due because the rest of the market ends up dropping their rates, where, that property that's been doing so well, or a little bit, especially the ownership, are a little bit hesitant to, play that game, because if they are looking at selling, why in the world would they, drop rates if they've been leading the market? What kind of problems does that, and have you seen where that causes a problem in an upcoming transaction?
Yeah, it's actually, in a lot of ways, it's easier to overcome objections from a buyer if the whole market is shifting. It's a little bit harder if the subject property is the one that is starting to lag behind. And so making sure that you have an explanation for what's happening is going to be really important, because a buyer isn't necessarily going to perceive a slowdown in terms of pre-leasing as a huge red flag. What they're going to look at is how other factors are correlating into that. Is the market slowing down? Have the rates been dropped? And what does the concession situation look like? So it's going to be making sure that you have a full picture of all 3 of those things, and understanding how your subject property relates to them is going to be what's really key. I will say that, while performance is something that is going to be the ultimate metric, having answers and understanding, even though the situation might not be ideal or might not be perfect, if you can demonstrate that you have an understanding and that you're invested and that you care, that's going to be what's really going to help you preserve, that job opportunity in the future.
Gotcha. Any other, I think we got through two of the mistakes. Were there any other ones that you wanted to add to that?
Mistakes that folks make. I think that there's more to be said for organizing your back office and your maintenance shed than people might think at first blush. So, and I'm sure you can relate to this, Wes, of having gone into quite a few, situations that were maybe a little bit more daunting than what you had anticipated. So, don't just focus on the front of your house. Focus on the back of the house. Open up your junk drawers. Clean them out, give your team the opportunity to invest in the betterment of the property. And that means getting organized, getting that feeling of workmanship and pride, and making sure that that's something that permeates all aspects of your day is important. It's not just making sure that you have that positive energy on the telephone, because there is a very, very good chance that whomever is planning to buy that property is going to secret shop your property and is going to be making those phone calls. So you don't want to just approach it in that way with that level of sensitivity. You want to make sure that you're organized and you're on top of it from start to finish.
And just, to kind of comment off of that, I think it's literally the maintenance shop. And, a lot of the other, I've walked into properties where, I'm looking at a potential acquisition, and we've got, into the file room, and it's just an utter mess. And it's like, this is going to take extra resources just to do the due diligence, because it's clear you're not organized, which, by the way, if people are not doing online leasing, because I think online leasing has been the biggest savior to having to go through a due diligence and checking everything out from a lease audit perspective. But then, when it comes to the maintenance shop, I mean, it's just like buying a used car. Like you clean it up before you sell it, and you don't leave all your makeup bags and everything in the trunk of the car, and you gotta make a potential buyer feel like they're buying a well-oiled machine, and that comes with being organized for sure. So glad you made that point.
Yeah, because the inventory will literally be a part of the due diligence documents and part of the sales documents. So if you as a property manager are going to your regional manager and saying, hey, look, I know this is coming down the pipe. They're going to want an inventory of all of the office goods. Here's a list of all of our computers and printers. We also know they're going to want a list of all the inventory in the shop. Here's a list of all of our inventory here. And if you're proving that you've already taken the time to make sure that those things are important to you, that just seals the deal for that future management company coming online. And the truth is, the regional manager at the company that is assuming the property, as well as the one that is, currently in place at the property, they are going to talk. They are going to talk about that on-site staff. And so showing that you guys are involved and that you understand how to motivate your team through a transition process like that is of inexplicable financial value. And so do not be afraid to ask for bonuses. Ask for bonuses from the disposition and ask for bonuses on the acquisition. Get it coming and going, because the truth is, if you're doing your job and you're going through the time and effort to do what I'm talking about here, you are adding quite literally millions of dollars of value to that property.
Yeah. I've always, kind of my background and the amount of time that I spent with the developer and that family that owned that development company, and a history of over almost 35 years of building and selling. And when they made it the switch from selling condos to students and their parents to to doing purpose-built apartment communities, that was one thing with the staff that I learned very early on. They would, even in the hiring process, for the lease up, they would explain, look, we are building this property with the intention of stabilizing it and selling it. We've hired you because we feel like you're the best and you can make this happen. We would love to take you to other places in the country where we are doing this, but if that doesn't work out, we completely understand. But we want you bought into the fact that our goal is to sell this property. And because of that, you're going to be compensated off of reaching that goal, and they would get a percentage. It was it was a nice payday, quite honestly, for a lot of those managers. And we did that with all of the full-time staff and even did some with the part-time staff, just because it's so key for the goals to be aligned and for them to understand what they are. And I never had a situation where we weren't, the whole staff, if something fell apart for some reason because maybe a buyer couldn't get financing or whatever, they were like almost devastated. It was not a situation where they were worried like they were going to lose their job and that type of thing. Before I get to my next question, any other mistakes you see folks making?
No, I really think that's it. Just going into it with a bad, defeated attitude, there's just no reason for that. And then, failing to pay attention to the details and getting organized, those are the two biggest things. I believe in my heart at the end of the day, Wes, that every single person watching this is going to do everything they can to stay on top of the collectability of the rents and to make sure that the rents that they are due, they are collected. That's a no-brainer and very obvious. And also making sure that they are taking as much opportunity as they can for their pre-leasing and their renewals. Those two. Yeah. They are absolutely given. I don't even feel, that we have to go into that in any greater detail.
Yeah. So when it comes to sellers who are considering a potential sell, what are some of the things that you see them do that just drives you up a wall?
It drives me crazy when they want to be paid for rent growth that they were never able to achieve themselves. Hear that. Yeah.
See that all the time.
Yeah.
So anything else besides that?
I will say that it is a pet peeve of mine when they keep the property, property being marketed, behind the curtain, and they don't reveal that to their on-site staff. That really does bother me. I don't think that it is that it's given the property the best opportunity to shine, because the truth is, at the end of the day, these folks are brilliant. They are the ones on the front line. When a bunch of weirdo potential buyers come in the front door, with their shiny shoes, and they are just there to look for an apartment.
Everybody knows what's up.
Everybody knows what's up. And so you're putting, your asset in such a point of vulnerability by not communicating to your on-site staff that, it's a real source of aggravation for me, because I'm the one on the awkward tour standing there with the leasing agent going, I'm sorry that I am being asked to lie to you. I don't appreciate, being asked to do that.
Yeah. So, let's, again, I want to kind of go back to that process, because you've seen this quite a bit. You've been a part of a lot of due diligence, especially in your consulting days. And, let's talk about the audit process, because I think if no one's been through that before, it can be a little daunting. And I think, and I know we've got some folks in our audience who have never gone through that, and just want to, kind of get your opinion on, or some insight into, things they need to be thinking about.
Yeah, concessions are going to be one of the places that they're going to dig in most closely. So making sure that you're properly annotating for each and every concession that's been offered or gift card that is being provided. You need to make sure that all of that stuff is properly documented. That's going to be really key. But you need to take it one step further. And if you really want to show your investment in the asset and your investment in the future success of the asset, you need to take a good long look and spend some time with your budget, with your income, with your expenses, and with your actuals to date. And if you haven't hitting those budgets.
I'm going to stop you right there because I'm just so glad you said that, because there is nothing more annoying than because I've been on the acquisition side. There's probably been at least 36 acquisitions that I've done in my career, and going in and starting to talk to someone about, to a property manager who really should be the one doing their own budget process. I'm still amazed at how many companies don't put that, it's a regional manager duty or something like that. But they don't understand every single line item and what's going into it. They don't understand, their budget variance to date. And that's, and they don't know how to run a T12 income statement. It's like, you got to know how to do those things and how to explain those things, because there's going to be a lot of questions on it. And honestly, that used to be something I would, when we were selling a property and I was, kind of in a regional manager role, we would role play it, between myself and the property manager, as to, okay, this is what they're going to come in and start asking. And so I'm so glad you said that.
Yeah, absolutely. One of my very favorite expressions is failure to prepare is preparing to fail. So when you know that you have a property that is going to go on the market, get involved in those numbers, print it out, get your ruler, get your pencil, get your highlighter, figure out where you have some little anomalies and those variances, and take ownership of it. It's never going to be a good enough answer to a buyer to say, I don't know, that's what we spent last year. That's not going to be, you've got to be prepared to associate a meaning and a why to every single line item in your budget, because it shows that you're invested. And, whomever it is that you're speaking with that's investing in the property, they're spending millions and millions of dollars. So knowing that you're willing to take ownership of these kinds of tasks is going to be of real value.
Yeah.
And when it comes to, some of those line items in the expense sections, I will tell you that where your buyers are going to be paying the most amount of scrutiny is going to be very closely connected to what we were talking about before, which is your concessions. And that's going to be your marketing section. So spend some real time on your marketing budget and make sure that you're understanding and you're doing the best you can to defend the ways that you are choosing to spend your dollars. Because a new buyer is so likely to come in and basically just slash that marketing budget because they're going to assume, that their new group can do it more efficiently. And if you want to protect yourself from having to deal with that and not have the resources that you need, you've got to be able to really take ownership of that marketing budget. So that's one of the sections that I would say buyers are most likely to slash that can do the most damage to a property. But it's a point that a property manager can really kind of reconcile those two if they take the time to really get ownership of those numbers and the needs associated with them.
Yeah, that's such of a key point, because I think when there's a particular property manager that I'm thinking about, right now as you're saying that, who when I was talking with her about buying her property, she knew her numbers forwards and backwards, and there were a lot of things that didn't match up from a regional perspective on some of the standards for expenses, right? NMHC puts a great report out regarding that, and we kind of use that to bookmark everything, right? And we were able to ask her those questions of, okay, well, why is marketing, why are these particular things in your marketing budget or your marketing expenses, why are those, what makes this up, and go into the one I love the best, comes down to turn expenses. And if someone has gone through that RFP process and can show to, a potential buyer, look, here are all, I won't ever forget this manager. She had she'd been in the property for 8 years, and she had a notebook of all of her bid processing for each year for turn. And so she was able to pull it out and say, look, I've got 3 to 5 bids on every single trade. Let me show you the ones that I picked and where everything was at. And it was like, there was no disputing anything that she said. And it was also great going through budget season with her too, because she knew exactly what she needed and what she didn't need. So yeah, thanks for mentioning that.
Well, and I want to add one more thing on to that, Wes. And that is, a buyer coming into a property, they are assuming that they are going to need to allocate some dollars to spruce the place up. Very rarely do you have a buyer come in who's expecting to spend less money on turnover. That's not very often, actually, because they are assuming that the property is being maintained to the best of its ability to that minimum requirement. So you'll actually see a buyer come in and say, you know what, let's get aggressive on these carpet replacements. Let's start doing more full paints this year. Let's get away from our touch-ups and our partials. So, think of this, like I was saying before, think of this as a golden ticket and put together your wish list. Is it kind of bumming the maintenance guys out to have a really dogged out looking golf cart? Put it on the list. These buyers are going to sit down with you and they're going to say, what do you want? And they're going to be eager to allocate those dollars. They're going to be energized by things that energize the people on site. If you get excited about it, then they know that you're going to be able to get renters excited about it. And that means more dollars for them, more surety of that income stream. So don't be afraid to put together a wish list, and don't be afraid to talk about things that you would do on the property if you had an unlimited amount of money. Talk about it, because these folks are sophisticated enough to be able to run those return on investment analysis to find out if maybe your idea about replacing all of the windows might be a good idea, or painting the whole property. So don't be afraid to go in with a wish list.
And I think to back that wish list up, if you're able to represent what that may mean in additional revenue, I remember purchasing a property that, didn't have a swimming pool, and everything in the market had a swimming pool. And the property manager said, that's the one key thing that, if it's someone coming off of campus for the first time, they really care about that, not so much with your graduate students. And, I know because of that, I'm missing out $15, $20 more in rent, per bed that I could otherwise. You can look at the market survey and kind of tell that. That's a really key part of having that wish list, is being able to back that into, some type of revenue, be it ancillary or, being able to provide some type of rent bump. So yeah, thanks for mentioning that. So I guess my last question is, and I hate asking it this way. I kind of want to say, what should property managers, make sure that they're not doing? But I'm reluctant to say that, because I feel like, this has got to be a very transparent process, because, things will end up coming up. So, I don't think, if something's going to fall apart, I'd rather it be known as early as possible. But I do think there is, I think site managers do need to be cognitive of how to frame certain things. And the first thing that kind of comes to my mind is university information. I think that's probably one of the hardest things to do in a market analysis, from a buyer's perspective. And you may have really great information as a site manager on conversations that you're having with administrators on campus that maybe they don't have. And sometimes that could take a buyer down a bunny trail. So are there certain things that you would suggest as far as framing to make sure that, they're, I don't want to say putting a positive spin, but what other things are out there that you would say they just really need to be cognitive of how they're framing certain discussions?
Yeah, and particularly when it comes to the university and the relationship there. That is one of the places that is the most difficult for someone who is remote to the market to get a real understanding of. So, of course, we all have our data. College House, on just before us today, Axiometrics, Yardy's in the game now too. So there's a lot of different resources out there to get sort of a picture of what things are looking like for a market. But when it comes to the details of really what's the day-to-day vibe like between the university and the private off-campus housing sector, that's something that I think a manager can really impart some real value there. And an example would be, what's the situation with bus routes? Are the bus routes being serviced, throughout the entire market to make sure that the students living off campus can get to campus conveniently? Or did the president, a year or two ago decide to cut funding to the buses because they didn't see the value for having the students brought in? So there's things like that. There's nuances that can really impart a sense to a buyer that can help them know kind of what sort of waters they're going into. Are they going to be at a situation where, you can only get a table at the housing fair if you sign up for it 8 months in advance? These are the kinds of things that can just be of tremendous value to a buyer because it helps them to get a little bit of an idea of what that relationship dynamic is going to look like. And one of the good things, or one of the silver linings to the pandemic, has been that the off-campus housing and the on-campus housing, and then also, of course, the administration that's part of the classroom instruction on campus, they have all had to work together like never before, to just keep it on the rails and keep the education system moving along. And so we've seen a lot of progress in that way. And I'm very optimistic that the universities themselves will continue to see value in the private off-campus sector. But giving your buyer a snapshot of what that really looks like, what that dynamic feels like, I think is of real value.
Yeah, I think this prior year has really opened their eyes to how important the private sector can be, because when they had to send all the students to remote and kick them out of on-campus housing, a lot of them, they didn't have homes to go to, and they had to look. And the thing is if there were stronger relationships with off-campus, I feel like there was more continuity between approaching everything that happened in March and April of last year with the universities, and things being very seamless for the students and providing kind of a great experience for them in the midst of something that wasn't a great experience, having to leave campus in the middle of a semester. Well, Jamie, thanks so much for your time today. Your insight and experience in this industry is just extraordinary. We need to hear your voice and thoughts regarding your perspective on what you're seeing in the market. And I appreciate you spending the time with us today to share your knowledge with everybody else. Last question: if we've got someone that is out there in the audience who has interest in potentially, becoming a consultant or a broker, what advice would you give them?
Save up. You're probably going to go hungry for a while. So if this is something that is a dream of yours, by all means, make it happen. I had a dream of going into brokerage when I was as young as 16. And in 2001, I was standing in front of Nathan Collier of Collier Companies based in Gainesville. And he said that his management added equity. And it literally was a light bulb experience for me. And so I spent the time on site trying to learn how to add value, trying to understand market dynamics, because I knew that I ultimately did want to go into brokerage. And so I examined every single situation from as many perspectives as I could to try and give myself that variable in terms of that perspective. And I think it's added a lot of value, and it certainly made it easier for me to do my job now.
Yeah, I love Nathan. He's a bit, unique in a lot of ways, as well as the company, but man, just spend a couple hours with him and ask him about his journey. And it completely will provide a shift in how you think about real estate. And so,
Yep.
so
Very
yeah,
inspiring.
there's a lot of what I know Nathan Collier to be that is certainly part of your perspective as well. And so that's another reason I'm always glad to get it. Well, hey, again, thanks so much for your time. If folks want to follow you, obviously you're on LinkedIn and that's actually in your speaker profile if they want to follow you there. Is there anywhere else that they can get a hold of you? And
Just call me. Just call me. I am not an active Twitter person, but I am happy to share my perspective and give advice to anybody. So, for me, if you want to make a personal connection, that's really what I would recommend. So just don't be afraid to shoot me an email or call me. I'm happy to connect and have a real person-to-person interaction.
Again, thanks so much for your time, Jamie, and looking forward to having some more discussions with you in the future.
Me too. Thanks, Wes.
Well, again, thanks to Jamie for giving her time for our memo audience. And if you've got any kind of questions, regardless if you're on site or if you are an owner investor, regardless of what character you play in the student housing world, Jamie has got an incredible amount of knowledge and insight. And I think spending some time with her would do anybody well. So Greg, Ron, now that you guys were able to take that in and hear those questions and answers, what's your perspective on it? Was there anything new that came out of it that you didn't think about before? And is there anything you're taking back to your teams on, how you guys are going to be operating moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, definitely some good points that I love to reiterate with the teams. And I think her first point just about momentum and making sure that, you don't let your foot off the gas. I know, I've been in the seat many times where owners have come to me and say, hey, we're going to go ahead and put this property in the market. And there's fear on site, no question. I mean, there's just oh my gosh, what does that mean? What do I do? Whether we've communicated everything perfectly or not, there's still just some internal fear. And I think if you turn that fear around and become what I'll call the opportunistic optimist, and really continue to focus on leasing and give great tours, there's so many opportunities for this on-site team to, not only knock it out of the park, have a great transaction, continue a relationship with that same client, whether they buy a new asset or, look to work with possibly the next ownership group that's coming in. Because a lot of times they don't necessarily want to shake up the on-site team. If things are going great, they love keeping a great team intact. So being that opportunistic optimist to me is just something that I love drilling into our teams and saying, guys, this could be a really positive thing. Yeah.
And I think, there's a couple of companies. Greg, yours is one of them. Asset is the largest third party operator that's out there. And there's always opportunity at Asset. I've seen a lot of my colleagues and friends go to Asset, move up. But when someone's starting a new company and investing in the space, it's going to be typically a smaller company. They may be buying something from, that Asset is currently managing. And to go into a situation, as a property manager and being picked up by a group that's probably not as big and as sophisticated as what Asset is, all of a sudden that person, that general manager of that property really kind of becomes, in a lot of ways, the expert and finds themselves an opportunity to help that smaller company become larger. So yeah, great opportunities there. Greg, your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely like the quote that she used, either be a victim or a victor sort of thing. So, I mean, going back to how small, student housing is compared to, it's a huge industry, don't get me wrong, but everyone is always interconnected somehow, somewhere, someplace sort of thing. So, whether you're changing companies or not, having that turnaround story that, you were here and now you leased it up, you sold it, everything turned out well. I mean, that makes a name for yourself that you can carry on to that next company, like you said, and or I mean, grow within the same company that managed you, before you sold. So, I mean, that's one thing that I definitely took back to my team is no matter what, if you're selling or not, always have that winning victory story to go with your property
Yeah.
that you're at.
Yeah, and as we've discussed, at the Madison, there's a perfect Victor story there where you guys took that thing from receivership to stabilization now, and it says a whole lot about the staff there and what you guys have been able to do, and a new owner eventually coming into that is going to look at that team and say, "Wow, these guys knew it when it was tough, right?" So, well, fantastic. So, Ron, any other takeaways?
Yeah, I mean, I think the other thing that just hit home for me is just this be organized. And it runs me back to just the thing that we all know, which first impressions really count. And if you walk in and the office is cluttered, the desk is cluttered in front of you, it's an immediate turnoff for me. And I go and tour properties all the time. And when I see that, I'm just worried. I'm worried there's going to be things lost. There's, just too much clutter, too many things going on. So I think those things just can't be forgotten because sometimes, especially during a transition or, when your property is going to the market and a lot of things are changing, a lot of the basics are maybe forgotten or just put to the side. And that's one thing where the first impression really counts. So make sure that your space looks organized, your maintenance shop looks organized, and you've decluttered everything because, like they say, a cluttered desk, a cluttered mind. I just make sure that, you really are putting your best foot forward, and you're not going to be able to do that if, you've just got a really unorganized space.
Yeah, and that's a key thing for the maintenance shop as well. That's one that really, I think most people are pretty good about keeping their office up because we're in clubhouses and leasing centers, right?
Mm-hmm.
But man, you go into a maintenance shop where you don't have someone that's organized, and you all of a sudden begin questioning everything that's going on with that
Exactly.
staff.
I've seen a couple.
Yeah. Greg, any other takeaways? Anything with your team that after coming out of that you're sharing with them?
I mean, I know that I think her was like her second point where she was talking about overall budget, and then she really hit home concessions as well as where the money's going, what it's going for, and when did it happen, sort of thing. So I mean, whether you're a cash property or not, you need to know. I mean, that's I guess really kind of hit home with me where I know exactly what's going on, where it's going, that sort of thing. So I mean, being on the other side of acquiring a property when you're doing a lease audit, I'm sure Ryan can attest, where you see concession forms of you have 8 concessions on one lease, and you're like, where's that money going, and why did we have to give that much? Is it the market, or is it the property where we're just trying to lease it up to actually get it out the door, sort of thing? So I mean, knowing those answers and knowing the reasoning behind it, I guess, is definitely a strong point that I know Jamie hit.
Yeah. Well, and she talks a little bit about making sure hitting leasing. There towards, especially the way a lot of these things get teed up. A lot of these closings either happen late spring, or they start happening right after the first of the year, or excuse me, not the first of the year, but September. First of the academic year. September, October timeframe. How's leasing going with you guys in Ames? And Ryan, maybe you've got some perspective on how the portfolio is going at CA with leasing. You guys feeling good about this year?
Yeah, I think we feel really good. Again, the industry as a whole was a little bit behind in pre-leasing, but we're seeing that gap close every day, which is great. Obviously, there's a lot more confidence in schools being more in person. So I think we feel really good. We feel really good. We've got obviously a couple markets that have been more challenged. But again, I mean, we're looking to our on-site teams. They're doing a great job. They know the challenge, they know the goals. And, we're just trying to empower them to do every single thing they can to get us across the finish line.
Gotcha. How's the market and Ames going?
I would say, I mean, we're definitely ahead of where the market should be. So, I mean, that's one thing. I know we were a little nervous, I guess. I mean, everybody would be when you come into of the unknown, I should say. So, I mean, from year over year, we're ahead by 60%. So, I mean, it's definitely going back to kind of where Jamie said, where you have to have the interconnections with the university, with what's going on with the university, and knowing what they're going to try to plan or not plan to do. So, definitely having that insight. And then, like I said, I mean, just hitting the ground running and doing anything you possibly can. And
yeah.
I see the outcome.
Yeah, the universities are, with the exception of a few states, the universities are really pushing to get everything back to 2019 levels, both in enrollment as well as just operations, right? So yeah, I'm optimistic. I'm looking at these weekly reports and of course monthly. We're on the memo series we're doing on the third Wednesday of each month. We have our market insights, and which is part of this one that Jamie was on. But we also combine that with from our strategic partners over at College House and Charlie Matthews, their CEO. If you don't know anything about College House, go check them out at collegehouse.com. But they're pretty much replacing the market survey that we've all been trying to get our hands around for decades now of getting good numbers from everybody. And, nationally, he goes through, all the national numbers and regional numbers. We're behind, as an industry. Southeast is weathering things pretty well. Southwest is weathering it pretty well. Even the Midwest is, but yeah, the West Coast and certainly the Northeast, where things have been impacted heavier than the rest of the country, it's really bringing things down as far as year over year pre-lease. But everybody seems pretty optimistic. I saw where I think I just posted on LinkedIn yesterday, Moody's has upgraded their rating for universities in the U.S. So hopefully everything keeps heading that position, and Ron gets his trip to Europe or wherever he wants to go and get some deals done there.
Anywhere at this point.
Well, guys, thanks so much again for being a part of this and offering your perspectives. And thanks again for being an ambassador for Student Housing Insight. And we'll talk to you soon.
Absolutely. Appreciate you having us on.
Yeah. Thank you again.
Take care, guys.